Welcome to Homebrew Master. I'm Sarah, and I'm your host and brewmaster. On this show, we find homebrewers and give them the opportunity to work with a professional. They get to learn some of the science behind brewing while I try to up their homebrew game. Today, we're brewing with Phil, and we're making a Bailey's-inspired porter. Later on, we'll be catching up with Tyler and Nick from Wishbone Brewing Company for the tasting. This is Homebrew Master. Welcome to Homebrew Master. I'm your host, Sarah. Today we're joined by Phil. Phil, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your brewing experience?
Well, I have been brewing for about 10 years now. Kind of a off and on weekend warrior maybe, but not every weekend.
Yeah.
I've used a Robo Brew.
Right.
And I think we're going to use one today.
We are going to use one today.
I'm really excited about that. Because
Nice.
I'm really thinking about just simplifying my whole setup. I've got igloo coolers for my mash tun and the kettle.
Yeah.
And more coolers for the sparge water.
Absolutely.
So much to clean and deal with.
Yes.
I feel like I would be brewing more often if I had a more simplified setup.
Absolutely, and you can easily do it in your house, so if it's the middle of winter and you still feel like brewing, you don't have to worry about the temperatures or anything like that. So what kind of beers do you like to brew and drink?
You know, that's like asking me my favorite music. I'm all over the place. I can really appreciate a lot of different styles and flavors.
Yeah.
I like a lawnmower beer, like a British bitter or something like that.
Yeah.
I do like IPAs. I've made double IPA batches that I've really enjoyed, and I even did a barley wine once when I just got out of control.
But that took a while to get ready.
I made a stout a few times. I like that.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the porter I made. The second time around, the first time, I remember I'm getting my grains together, and I think to myself, that is not enough, dark roasted grain for this. And so I like doubled up what it called for, thinking, I want a nice, hearty...
A robust porter.
Yeah, exactly. But I couldn't even see the sun through it when it was done. It was black as motor oil.
It is surprising at how little dark malt you need to really impact the color and the flavor profile.
Yeah, and how easy it is to overdo it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So difficult to find a porter, but I did find us a dark chocolate lager to try. So we can taste this, talk about what we like, what we don't like, what you might want to see in your beer, if you want to add any special flavors to yours, anything like that. So let's give this a taste. Cheers.
Cheers.
It's a nice, rich, dark chocolate flavor.
It really is.
So do you want to go more on the dark bitter side, or are you looking for something a little sweeter?
I think a little sweeter.
Yeah.
What I love about a porter is how good it is on a cold day. And one of my favorite things about the winter season is having some Baileys in my coffee.
Absolutely.
So I thought maybe we could sort of combine that idea and do like a Bailey's inspired porter.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah.
So then we definitely want to go a little sweeter than this. Because it's a lager, it's still pretty light and refreshing, even though it's a dark beer. So I feel like for the porter, we want it to be a little milkier, a little heavier, a little creamier.
Exactly.
So let's talk about some of the ingredients we're going to use in your porter. So for our malts, we are doing pale ale for our base malt. I just like it because it's got a little bit more character than, say, your two-row or your Pilsen. It's a little less crackery, more bready. Feels like it'd be a better backbone for your beer. So I do recommend trying malts anytime you're adding a new one, just so you can get some idea of the flavor profile. So this is actually the pale chocolate malt. So you get that roast character, that deep chocolatey, the bitter, but we're gonna balance that with other ingredients. And then to give you a more complex chocolate character, I think we're also gonna add a little bit of the dark chocolate malt, which will help get that color where you want it, and just give you a nice rounded chocolate character in the final product. And we're also gonna add a little bit of honey malt in there. That's just gonna help back sweeten everything so we don't get too much of that bitterness coming through. So for hops, obviously we're keeping it pretty simple because this is not a hop forward beer at all. This is gonna be a malty, sweet flavor bomb.
Right.
But we still wanna balance that with some hops. So for the bittering hops, we're just going with Zeus high alpha acids, get a little bit of bitterness in there to balance everything out so it doesn't become saccharine. And then for your aroma hop, we're going to use Saaz. So it's a near noble hop, very delicate flavor profile, little earthy, a little spicy, should just add a nice background note. Noble hops, if you aren't sure, those are sort of the original hops that all of our modern day hops are bred from. So I don't recommend tasting these because that wouldn't be very nice. But what I do recommend trying is what we call a hop rub. So you're just gonna put them between your hands and you give them a good rub. The heat from your hands will release some of the essential oils. And then if you smell your hands, you can pick up what sort of aromas are gonna be coming out in your beer. So not a lot from this because it is a near noble hop, but you just get that little bit of sort of earthy background note that should complement everything really nicely.
And is this the Saaz?
This is the Saaz.
Yeah. I've used this quite a number of times.
I'm a big
I've been
fan.
Happy with
yeah,
it.
It's really nice.
Yeah.
Now, of course, we are also going to add extra flavors into your brew. So we have got coffee,
right?
Vanilla beans. We might decide to add some cocoa nibs as well. We're gonna see how the beer turns out with the chocolate malt. See if we like that flavor profile. If not, you can also always top it up with just a few cocoa nibs to really bump up that chocolate flavor.
Okay. So for the Baileys, we've got the vanilla.
Yep.
Because that's a big part of it.
Big part of it. And we'll be putting the whole beans in the fermenter at the end of fermentation.
Okay.
Same with the coffee. So if you want to give that a little sniff, so that'll just help bring all of those flavors out. Now, the reason I like to add these at the end of fermentation is you know what your base beer is at that point. So if we're going to be adding big flavors like vanilla and coffee, you want to have complete control over how long they're in contact with your beer and the ability to remove them as soon as you're happy with the flavor profile. So that's why I like to put them in later, so I'm not disrupting the fermentation at all, and I have complete control over how quickly I take them out.
Okay.
All right. And if we do decide to add the cocoa nibs, we'll do the same thing with that and just bump up the chocolate flavor a little bit if we feel we need it.
Right, like salt and pepper to taste.
Exactly,
Nice.
exactly. So you still have lots of opportunity, even after you finish fermenting a beer, when you're adding all these extra flavors, to play with that flavor profile a little bit. Sound like a plan?
I can't wait to get started.
All right, let's get mashed in then.
Okay, cool. It's really nice you just have the mash and the oil all in the same pot.
Oh, absolutely. Welcome back to Brewmaster. We're about to brew a coffee and Bailey's inspired porter with intermediate brewer Phil. Let's get started. Now, you told me earlier that you have used the RoboBrew once before.
Yes.
So I figure I'm just going to give you instructions and you're going to do most of the work. That way you can get a little bit more comfortable with using it by yourself.
All right, look forward to it. Hi, I'm Phil. I've been homebrewing for the past 10 years or so. I enjoy learning about it, and I'm looking forward to really learning more.
I do like to have my strike temperature a little bit higher, so the water that we're gonna add the grains to, just because you're gonna lose a bit of temperature through the mash-in process. So first I'll get you to lower the temperature 2 degrees.
Okay. At 67.
Perfect. Now we're going in at 67 because you wanted a slightly sweeter beer, so we want to keep some of those complex sugars in instead of drying everything out too much.
Okay.
But because we have so much dark malt going in, we're also going to add some rice hulls. So normally we add the rice hulls when you're using a lot of wheat or rye or some grain that doesn't have its own husk, because then you don't have as much like filter material in the mash. Now, we don't have any of those in your brew, but what we do have is a lot of dark malt, which is what is usually referred to as very friable. So it breaks down into powder very easily, and you can have a stuck mash where you can't strain through it.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna get you to stir them in a bit. What we're hoping for is that the rice hulls end up throughout the entire mash to help with the straining instead of just being sitting on the bottom. Because they are just the outside part of the grain, you really need to get them good and wet inside of your mash for them to be effective.
Today, Brewmaster Sarah and I are going to try a take on a porter that has a Bailey's inspiration. You know, something pretty robust in flavor with strong vanilla and chocolate and coffee.
I was going for about 5% alcohol, so that's going to dictate how much grain you put in, because your grain is what gives you sugar, which becomes alcohol once you add the yeast. So for his beer, we went with 3.6 kilograms of pale malt, Now that is one of the sort of sweeter, richer base malts. The base malt basically means that's where you're getting most of your sugar from. We also added a kilogram of flaked barley. Now that's going to give you some body and some head retention. 0.6 kilograms of chocolate malt and 0.3 kilograms of pale chocolate, just to sort of give you that nice complex roasted character. And then we also had 0.3 kilograms of honey malt, which just helps add a little bit of sweetness to the final product. So then we just place our silicone hose, turn our pump on.
Perfect.
And you just want a really slow drizzle. And it's just helping to pull all of that extract and that color.
Perfect.
Yeah, so once that's set, we set our timer for an hour and we'll be back to finish off the brew.
Talking with Sarah and appreciating some of these notes that are gonna go into it. And I'm just really excited to see how this all comes together.
Working with Phil was great. He has only ever done the sort of igloo cooler type mash tun brewing. So it was really fun to show him what other options are available to homebrewers and how he can sort of level it up if he chooses to do so. All right, so we've been mashed for an hour. Now we're gonna sparge, which is basically the point where you're adding liquid to pull out all of the extract that you've created, all the colors, all the flavors. So first things first, we're gonna turn off that pump.
Okay.
And then just open that valve up all the way. You just wanna make sure you get as much of the wort out of the line as possible. And then you can just pull the hose out and set it to the side. You know, pull your lid off now.
Okay.
And you're gonna grab that handle.
Ooh, look at the color of that.
Look at that nice color.
There we go.
Pull it straight up and then twist so the feet are resting. Exactly. Now you got it up, you can set the temperature to high right away so that we're not wasting time. So just like before. So that's just gonna save us some time. It's already gonna start coming up to a boil. But basically you're just going to use that measuring cup, fill up from the hot liquor tank, which is just hot water. And we're just gonna keep rinsing those grains until we hit about 25 liters. Now I do keep my sparge water higher than the temperature. One, that just helps us get it to a boil faster. It also helps sort of loosen everything up in the mash and speed the process up a little bit.
I see.
And you just wanna pour and make sure that you aren't going over where that tube is, because then that water will just be running straight down.
Okay.
And then when we get close to the bottom of the hot liquor tank, we'll start paying a lot of attention to exactly what volume we have. So I think we're at about 25 liters now. I know you brought a flashlight.
I did.
If you want to just check the side there. It's kind of hard to see in, but you can see the little demarcations on the side. We should be pretty close to 25 liters.
Yep, we're bang on.
Perfect. So now we're gonna use the handle to pull the grain bed off. Exactly, and rest it in the bucket to finish draining.
Okay.
Perfect. And now we'll just put the lid back on and we'll wait for it to come up to a boil.
Working with Brewmaster Sarah has been a real treat. I've been going it alone for a long time on the driveway. Just watching her work, I'm picking up tips and listening to what she says. She's a wealth of knowledge.
Okay, so it looks like we're just about up to a boil now. So the proteins of the malt start to come out and you really want to mix them in, otherwise you're gonna get a boil over. So if you want to take the lid off and just grab this spoon, and you're just gonna slowly mix those in. And you'll see as it comes up to a boil, they'll sort of blend back into your wort.
Oh, we got movement now.
We got movement now. So now we're gonna add our bittering hops. Because the all-in-one system that we're using has the pump built in, I like to use these hop balls, and that just keeps the hops out of your pump. Once it came to the boil, we used 9.7 grams of Zeus with 11% alpha acids for bittering. Now, the alpha acids are what comes out during the boiling process to give you bitterness to help balance against the sweetness you get from your malt. So now we're gonna set the timer for an hour. Boil will be done. We're gonna add a few more ingredients and then we're ready to cast out. As far as the aroma hop is concerned, we went with 30 grams of Czech Saaz. Now that's a noble hop that has a little bit of spice character to it, so I thought that would really complement the sort of Bailey's inspiration we were going with. We also added 75 grams of lactose and 20 grams of maltodextrin at the whirlpool. So lactose and maltodextrin are both unfermentable sugars. The yeast is incapable of eating them. Lactose adds sweetness and maltodextrin adds creaminess and body. So I turn the pump on and then I just slowly start to open this valve to let all of the air out.
I see it bubbling.
And then it starts to smooth itself out. And now the whirlpool is gonna start, and we've got about 10 minutes, and then we're gonna cast out and pitch the yeast.
I'm really looking forward to tasting how this works out. Sarah's recipe, it looks amazing, and looking at the ingredients and the idea, I'm pretty pumped.
So now we've been whirlpooling, that's all done. Everything's mixed in, we've got all of our flavors, we've got all of our sweeteners. So time to cast out this beer. So first off, I'm just gonna stop the whirlpool. We're going to unhook here, and then we're gonna set up to cool. So we'll get you to set in the adapter exactly. So that just goes in like everything else.
Lock it
Perfect.
down.
And this side isn't sanitized because we've got heat on our side. So the wort is actually gonna sanitize everything on this end. The other end where the wort comes out, that's all packed with sanitizer, and we're gonna run that through before the beer comes out. So you're just going to release the wort in. Now you can just set that in the bucket and just try to make sure that the sides aren't touching anything. And now we're gonna set up our wort in hose. So you're just gonna hook that up to our adapter, and then you're gonna hook that into the side that you just disconnected.
Okay.
So now we're just gonna turn our cold water on to make sure the chiller is nice and cool. So if you wanna reach in front and just use the valve there to get that cooling down. And now I'm gonna turn on the pump and just slowly start introducing the wort to you. Just hold that up from the bucket.
Okay.
And you'll see it turn from sanitizer to beer pretty quickly. Okay, and now you're good to put the hose right in the fermenter. Cooling out. And basically I just wait until I hear the pump start to struggle, and it's the second I hear that I turn it off.
Okay.
There it is, off. You can just put that hose back in the bucket.
Okay.
And then I'll put the lid back on. Now everything should be at temperature. All we have to do is pitch our yeast. For fermentation, we went with the Opshog Kveik for Phil's beer. Kveik is a Norwegian style yeast. So we actually pitched it at 35 degrees Celsius, which makes the whole fermentation process much shorter. And then once the fermentation was complete, that's when I added some of the extra flavors for his beer. I wasn't sure how much coffee would come out or how much chocolate would come out in the actual beer itself. So I wanted the fermentation to be complete, have a little taste of it, and judge what we should be adding at that point. And that's when I went in with 75 grams of Bulletproof, the original coffee beans, 50 grams of Ghana cocoa nibs, and 2 vanilla beans. And we just let that sit in there for about a week. All right, well, let's give her a taste.
Cheers.
Homebrewer Phil's Coffee and Bailey's Inspired Porter is finished fermenting, aging, and carbonating. Let's give this beer a taste. Welcome back to Brewmaster. All of our beers are finished, and we're here for the moment everyone's been waiting for, the tastings of the beer. Our guest tasters today are Tyler Ferguson, owner of Wishbone Brewing Company, and Nick Lang, brewmaster of Wishbone Brewing Company. Thanks for joining us, guys. I'd like to introduce you to Phil. He's our home brewer. Now, we brewed a sort of Bailey's-inspired porter. So it's got some coffee, got some chocolate, got some vanilla going on. Well-rounded, hopefully, flavored porter that we'll be trying today. So why don't you guys tell us a little bit about your brewery?
Yeah, so we opened up about 8 weeks ago in Waterford, Ontario. Feels great to be part of Norfolk County. Just a lot of wonderful people and wonderful breweries and other businesses around. Yeah, we got a pretty neat program of beers. Started off with about 10 on tap, nice and fun right off the bat, and it's been a good experience so far.
Awesome.
Yeah, opening with that many was a little ambitious maybe, but we managed to cover our bases a little bit, get the easy drinkers and something a little bit more experimental on tap. So the goal ultimately being every drink leaves somebody wanting a little bit more of that same one.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's fantastic. So what do you guys think makes Wishbone unique?
Being in Waterford, the locals are kind of what make the business drive forward, especially starting from brand new, and the support's been fantastic, and so that's been nice. And in terms on the brewery level, it's a small space, and every square inch is taken advantage of. So it's a pretty fun visit when you take a little walk through the brewery. Yeah, overall, I just think the beers are fun. They're easy to drink, and everyone who steps in is going to like something, whether it is a seltzer, a radler, they want a hazy, they want something bigger, we got it. So it's pretty exciting.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So how do you guys feel about this sort of flavored porter style in general?
I'll be honest, it's not something I reach for all
Fair
the
enough,
time.
fair
But
enough.
especially when the colder weather hits, I'll find myself sipping on one out back, you know?
Oh, I'm with you on
Catch a
that.
little bit of snowfall and a drink.
Yeah, no, hey, it's kind of the dessert-inspired beers can be certainly fun, and yeah, I'm excited
Absolutely.
to try it. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks again, guys, for joining us. Let's get to this tasting.
Perfect.
All right, so we've got our Bailey's inspired porter here. Let's do a tasting. So I always like to start with the color.
That's got a real nice color.
It's red and auburn coming through at the edges.
Yeah, I love a porter or a stout where if you look at it on the table, you think it's just dark, and then as soon as you hold it up, yeah, you get all those nice red colors coming through. Then of course we got our lovely off-white head going on there. And let's give it a smell.
Very
Yeah.
roasty.
Very roasty.
Coffee and cocoa right up top.
Oh yeah, and this is actually Phil's favorite coffee that we put in. So he picked the
Alright.
exact coffee bean that we wanted to add the flavor
Good.
with. All right, well let's give her a taste.
Cheers. It's wonderful.
I'm glad you like it.
It's
Oh.
nice and creamy, but it's not too thick. I think that's really nice.
It's very well balanced. The bitterness and the sweetness, the balance is great.
Nice, thank you. Yeah, I didn't want to go too over the top with the sweetness because even though you have that sort of dessert beer, you still want to have that beer backbone, right? You don't want to go sort of into actual dessert realm most of the time.
Yes.
Yeah. This, even with all the adjuncts and the sweet leaning, it's a style driven by excess a lot of the time. And this is, very, very drinkable.
Nice.
Everything shows up to the party, but I'm happy to have this glass.
Excellent.
Now, did you crush up that vanilla bean, or did you throw it in whole?
I split them both open just to make sure that all of the little seeds were available.
Yep.
And I didn't bother scraping it up, but I put them in whole. I just wanted to open it up and make sure that the beer could access all aspects of it and not just get the skin flavors, because obviously the seeds are where the majority of that vanilla comes from. But I feel like you get that nice sort of rounded vanilla flavor when you add the whole pod and not just the beans in there.
Right.
So it was whole coffee beans, the whole vanilla beans, and then cocoa nibs.
I find the coffee, it's present but not overbearing. And I really like everything, like you say, is very well balanced.
Nice.
And it looks thicker than it feels.
Yeah.
You know? So you take a swallow and it's pretty smooth. You know?
Yeah, trying to keep that porter, not trying to keep it back from a stout when you're adding all these different flavors in can be a little tricky sometimes,
Yeah.
as I'm sure you guys have experienced.
What ABV is this at?
It's about 5.
About 5?
Okay.
Yeah. It's I believe this one came out at just under, like a 4.9.
Oh.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
I actually prefer to make the lower alcohol beers because I just like the taste of beer. The lower the alcohol, the more you can drink.
Give me a 3.5% grisette or a light
Absolutely.
lager all day long.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
Not to say I'm going to turn this away.
So would you want to change anything about this beer?
I can't say that I would.
No.
It's really good.
Nice. It has that sort of Bailey's thing you were looking for.
Exactly, yeah. Again, that coffee is just so pronounced and nice, but the vanilla touch too. And you said you put cocoa in here as
Yeah,
well.
just a little bit, because I remember we were talking about on the brew day, I wanted to let the beer finish before I added the flavors in, because I wasn't sure how much the chocolate malt would come out, and I hadn't quite decided if we needed to sort of bump that up a bit. So yeah, I definitely found when I tasted it at the end of fermentation, it was sort of just roast. It didn't lean sort of coffee or chocolate.
Right.
So I decided to add them both.
Perfect.
Nice.
Try and get that nice sort of rounded roast flavor going on. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. Phil, thanks again for being one of our home brewers, and I'm really glad you guys all enjoyed it.
Oh, Homebrew Master has been a lot of fun. I feel like I've, just being around the culture of brewing, I'm up my game a bit, and I'm excited to try new things and just ready to get back home and do some brewing.